Hey guys, Caleb with White Metal Games here. Today we're bringing you a cheat code. This is our shortest video series where we offer you tips and tricks to improve your hobby skills. On today's cheat code, we're going to be adding wings to a model that does not have wings, and we're calling this Add Wings to Anything. And the basic idea is that there's a lot of models in games that you want to add wings to. Just because the model or the kit doesn't have them doesn't mean it couldn't or shouldn't. Lots of times we're asked to modify figures, so this is one of the most common requests we get, is putting wings on something. So today we're going to show you how we generally do that. So on today's episode though, back to what we're doing, we're going to be working with this figure. This is called a Minotaur Lord. He is from Reaper. Essentially the Minotaur Lord is just a big bad demon prince kind of guy. And I just really loved this figure. I really fell in love with the basic way it looks. I'm just a big fan of it. So I decided the only thing I wanted to do differently was I wanted to add some wings to it, because I'd like to be able to use this in other games as kind of a winged demon, and I would prefer some wings. So on today's cheat code, that's what we're going to do. Now I've selected a set of wings of appropriate size. These are from a Warhammer Fantasy Dragon. Warhammer Dragons are really well known for these kind of wings, and they're out of production now. So these are a little bit harder to get, but they're still a really nice looking set of wings, a valuable piece. These are in plastic. Now it's worth noting these are different materials. This is a hard plastic and this is a soft PVC. Despite that, we're going to be able to make it work just fine. In general, the biggest problem with these kind of figures is that just gluing on the wings, while it may work temporarily, will actually not be a strong connection. The wing will fall off very quickly. So what we're going to do is pin these in today. So we're going to custom fit it, pin it, and then maybe sculpt in a little detail just to hide it. One of the challenges with this particular figure is that he has this big, honestly very cool looking shoulder pad here that unfortunately just doesn't work with wings. If we were to mount the wing to this particular part of the model here, you can see that's where I'd like to put it, and unfortunately it's just not going to work there. So I'm going to have to pull off the shoulder pad, save this for something else down the road, maybe put it on the other shoulder if I don't want to waste it. And then just sculpt some musculature up here and call that a day. Because this is essentially prime real estate for where I want to put that wing overall. So that's how we're going to do it. Okay, so for the most part, we're just going to keep this really simple. You're going to dry fit the wings to the model, see how they fit on, clean up any excess residue that's left over, and then just pin it in. So in this particular case, you can see that originally these models were meant to pin directly into the Dragons for Games Workshop. You can see it's essentially got a small plastic pin here and then a groove over here on the side, which if you can see there. Basically that's meant to go on their shoulder. That will not be useful to us, so we have to go do away with it. So we're going to remove that piece and clean it up, smooth it out just a little bit with a hobby knife. We'll do a dry fit real quick, see how that feels. It feels pretty good. Overall that fits just fine. And I think that I'm going to be satisfied with that. The only thing I'm going to have to do, probably more likely than not, is just pin that into place. Now you can see here that the flat side of the wing there is the ideal place to place that pin, but of course it's not going to rest squarely flat on this model. So this is where you have to sort of make a choice, right? You don't know exactly which way you want to go with it. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to pin it from the flat edge here and kind of go diagonal into the model. So I'm going to grab a drill. Now I know this could barely be visible on camera, but essentially we're using a cordless drill. It's a Hitachi, it's cheap, but any drill will do. And this will be loud, and I don't think it's going to entirely be captured on camera. And I apologize for that, but my goal here is basically to mount this wing this way, more or less. And to do that, I'm going to have to mount the drill bit there and then drill essentially into his primary shoulder right there. So I'm going to start by just drilling it up here. So now that I've got a basic hole in there, I'm going to put a little rod in there. I'm using 1/16 inch brass rod today. And I don't need all this. I'm just going to clip off a small piece, more than I'll need. And I'm going to feed that into the gap just to see about how much threads in. And that kind of gives me a sense of how deep I went in there, and I didn't go in that deep, so I'm going to put it in a little deeper because I want this to be a nice strong support. Sometimes you can look at the top of this thing and see if your drill bit is essentially pushing up through And if that's the case, then basically you know you need to take it easy and go slow. So now we've got a drill bit in there, or we've got the hole drilled out rather. Okay, that feels pretty good. Nice and sturdy. Oop. Clearly not that nice and sturdy. Okay, great. So now we've got that in there. I'm going to give it about 1/2 inch or so, which will be enough to go into the wing. I could have made that maybe a little bit longer, but that's okay. So now that that's done, I've got a basic sense for where I want the hole to go. And I want the hole to basically go, give or take around here, this general area. Some people would sit there with a Sharpie and mark it out. I'm just going to use a quick little knife thrust to do the exact same thing and drill it out. Now the angle here is important because of the angle I'm going to come in with the wing. I want to essentially match that angle on the shoulder, right? So I'm going to come in at, I think it's roughly a 45-degree angle, give or take. Okay. After I get that first hole in there, and if it's wrong, bear in mind we can fix it, it's not a big deal. I'm going to go ahead and put this wing in there and just see how it fits, see how it feels, see how it looks. Okay. Overall, that feels pretty good. That's about the right position, and it feels pretty good on the body. I like the basic position of it. I'm going to flip him around a little bit and see if I still like him. Now I probably could ride the wing back a little bit lower. I could probably do it more like this. Up here, it does feel a little high, doesn't it? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut a second hole in this guy, because I'm going to sculpt it anyway, right? I'm going to putty it up, so it doesn't really matter. So now that I've done that first one and seen it and made a thought about it, I'm going to try something a little bit different. Ride it back a little higher. I'm going to do one more dry fit, measure twice, cut once kind of thing. All right, so we're going to go in essentially to his spine right here. All right, so that feels pretty good. Give it a little clip. So now we'll see how this feels. All right. Feels pretty good. It looks right on the model. Feels pretty good. Positionally, I think it's okay. The only problem I'm thinking about now is that when we put that second wing on there, they may ride a little close. So I'm just going to bend it just a bit. And brass rod's really good for that. You can bend it. It's pliable. It won't break like pewter or soft white metals. So you can bend it, manipulate it a little bit. So I think like that feels pretty good. So at this point, I'm satisfied with that wing. I'm going to pull it off, set it aside for now. Now we can start to worry about the second wing. And the second wing is basically the same thing. It's the same basic problem. We have two problems with this wing. One is, again, that shoulder pad is originally where we wanted it to be, and we don't want to crowd the first wing. So we're going to do the same thing we did with the first wing. We're going to remove that nub, pull it off. So now let's dry fit this one again. So we're trying to basically make sure that we don't push these too close together. So we don't, this is essentially, I want this up here. I don't want it crowding on this thing. I don't want it to be like that tight. I want it basically to be more like this. So basically the problem is that giant nub is exactly where I want to be. And that is a problem. So we're going to have to remove it, unfortunately. Goodbye. All right, so with that off there, now we have more options. Now, this guy doesn't come fully assembled like this, but I assembled him basically so that I could gauge the full scope of the model. As opposed to just assembling the torso, that would have been easier to work with, but I might not have been able to get a full sense of what he would look like. Alright, so now with that done, we should be able to dry fit the wing, kind of figure it out. So, essentially to make this work, we're really going to have to go in almost kind of diagonal, like right there. And he's got a few details here, and it might be worth my time to carve those off. But I may be able to disguise it later. So I think the better solution may be to just go ahead and carve this wing. So what I'm going to do is, instead of trying to force fit it to work on that figure, I'm going to just manipulate the wing a little bit. So I'm going to pop this and that. And basically what I'm trying to do here is, if you look on the first wing, you can see that it is essentially diagonal this way, right? And this one, of course, was the polar opposite of that. So now we're trying to flip-flop that. We're trying to basically turn what was at this angle essentially into the other way so that it rests that way. So we cut a little bit, and then we'll dry fit, and now we'll cut again. It's not quite steep enough. All right, that's starting to feel right. That's getting pretty close to what I'd like. I'm actually pretty happy with that general fit. So now let's do a look and see how they'll look side by side. I think it's gonna look okay. I think it's gonna look pretty good overall. All right, so with that satisfactory, now I just need to look for the best way to join these up together. And honestly, I think the best way is just to put a small hole right here in the center of this. You can see it right here. And then match that hole on this guy's body and basically just lay it right there kind of flat. So let's do it. So much like the last time, I'm gonna feel it with a rod first and see how deep it went. Not bad. And now we just need to match this angle on this figure. And even though it's hard to see here, I'm gonna basically go right in here at the top of this nub up here, if that makes sense at all. So now we're going to mount the second wing, maybe. Alright, so now I've got them up side by side and I can kind of feel it out a little bit. And overall it's still feeling pretty good. I can see that because of the way this guy's shoulder is riding up, that second wing is a little high and it's a little uneven. So there's a couple options here. One is I could simply accept that that's anatomically correct, or I could force this wing down a little bit lower for aesthetic purposes. And I think that I would prefer aesthetic versus anatomical. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just drill a second hole behind that one and just force this one to ride down just a little bit. So we'll dry fit again, kind of get a sense for where we need it to go. Feels about right. All right, yeah, that fits a lot closer, a lot tighter. And now we'll put the second wing up there. All right, and other than them being a little tightly close together, overall that works fine. So we'll bend the rod into position, and that feels pretty good. Overall, that's about where I want these guys to be. And I'm gonna do a kind of a 360 spin on this guy, see how he feels. Overall, he's feeling pretty good, satisfied. So now it's just really a matter of gluing his wings into position just like that, and then adding some putty to sort of sculpt it in. So I'm going to go ahead and glue. Alright guys, so I glued the wings of this model off camera. I was having a little trouble with my glue for a second there, but essentially we just glued them into position using really any sort of super glue is totally fine. So now for the gaps, what we're going to do is we're going to sculpt in the gaps and just really just with some very basic technique, just add something there. So you can see here that this guy is missing. There's literally a gap there I can push my knife into. And then we know the wings are nice and strong because of the pen. We still need a little something there. So I mixed up a little bit of my epoxy sculpt, which is a two-part modeling compound. We've talked about that in previous videos. But the two-part epoxy sculpt is basically just equal parts if you want it to be around the same consistency. I'm going to roll this out into a long roll, and I don't need all this, so I'm going to put some of this aside and just roll out the rest. And basically what I'm going to do is just fill the gap and then smooth it out, and then if I want to work in a little musculature I can, but I don't have to. It's not required. So for this video we're going to keep it pretty simple. So I've got a long roll of this. Basically what I'm going to do is just kind of literally work this around it, and I'm going to use the bigger parts into the bigger gaps, and kind of just like a string cheese, just push it in there. Now I'm going to use a sculpting tool to help maneuver it into position, because at this point on the back of his body I really can't get my finger down in there. It's a little too tight, a little too cramped. Alright, so I got it around the first wing. Now what I'm going to do is just go ahead and smooth that out. We're going to use clay shapers for this. Clay shapers are basically just wax tools that you use to literally shape clay. And the liquid I'm dipping it into there in the center of the camera is a solvent. It's called Safety Solvent, and all of this is available from Ave Studios, by the way, AVES. So everything that they sell is sculpting related, and a lot of the products we use are exactly just that. So all I'm doing is I'm just using this clay shaper, this rounded shaper, essentially to just smooth out the rough edges here. And in the same way that you blend paint, you can also blend essentially clay, or in this case, epoxy. So what I'm trying to do is just smooth it into the underlying layer. And in that way, when it's painted, it will look like just a natural growth on the shoulders of this very unnatural creature. So even just that little bit of work there, we've essentially worked it in, smoothed it out, so that now it looks mostly uniform there. So we're going to do the same thing on the other side, and then when that's done, we'll just show you how to add a little bit of muscle texture. Okay, and we've got some wings up there. Looks pretty good. I'm pretty happy with it. Okay, so let's grab the rest of the putty. And what we're going to do is we're going to try to disguise this shoulder. Originally that shoulder had a big shoulder pad up there, but now that shoulder pad is gone. Well, it's not gone, but it definitely won't fit up there anymore. Now, one thing I could do is I could grab a chaos shoulder pad and kind of work it up there. But I'm still going to need something to basically start with. So what I'm really going to do here is I'm just going to grab a basic bead of putty, and I could just put it right up there on top and just kind of essentially just smooth it out, rub it out, and that'd be fine. If you look at this other shoulder, you really see, honestly, there's very minimal detail here. There's one sharp undercut underneath of there where the shoulder meets the arm, and that's really it. So for a lot of times, basic sculpting is really not that hard. So what I'm going to do is just grab my shaper again, and I'm going to start to press it into the general shape that I want, in the general position that I want. Okay, so that's about it. So basically added in a couple muscles, smoothed out the putty around the figure overall. And if for whatever reason down after this guy has dried and cured, I don't like this, I have a nice smooth surface that I can now add a shoulder pad onto without any worries. And that's about all. So I hope you've enjoyed this cheat code. Just so you know, you can add wings to anything, and send us some pictures. Email them to us through our Patreon page. We'd love to see what you guys come up with. So that's about it for now. I hope you enjoy the next video in our series. We're going to be working on a special Illidan Demon Prince conversion for our giveaway next month. So look forward to that, enjoy it, and in the meantime, put your minis where your mouth is.